Welcome in, everybody. It is Wednesday, January 8th. We are in the thick of the winter season here for Indiana football. Matt, obviously, there's been a lot that's happened. I think last time we recorded was right before the college football playoff game against Notre Dame. So, I definitely need to talk about that game. But transfer portal stuff has been moving super quick for Indiana here. They're up to, I believe it is 16 commitments right now. Expected to have more on the way as the things roll along, and then obviously the spring winter portal or window as well. Um, let's start, Matt. The IU Notre Dame game. This was now that we've been a few weeks removed, now that we've seen how the college football playoff has actually played out, and ironically, all those talking heads that wanted to bemoan Indiana for losing in the fashion that it did kind of blow back in their face. Now that you've kind of had a chance to reflect on that game, what did you think of it? Because I honestly thought Indiana didn't play as bad as I thought in real time after going back and watching it.
No, I mean honestly, I thought the defense was pretty solid. It was a little bit similar to me to the Ohio State game, maybe not quite as one sided, where the offense kind of struggled. They moved the ball down the field after that turnover. That first pick, and Rourke has played so well, and we found out, that he was playing basically on one leg all year. But it was such an uncharacteristic throw, that pick down by the goal line. I mean, when you watched it, it was Keyshawn Williams, who's one of the smaller receivers. He was not. He was basically bracketed, and there's a third guy there. It'd be one thing if you're throwing it to like Sarad or a taller receiver, but you're throwing it to one of the shorter guys. It seemed like he forced it. I thought overall, take out that. I mean, you can't take it out. They had the 98-yard run after that pick, but really, I thought the defense was pretty solid. I don't think it looked. The offensive line struggled. They kind of, it was kind of similar to Ohio State, Michigan in that regard. And I think that's probably one of the biggest areas. And we'll talk about portal guys later, but trying to get longer, be a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit more athletic on the O line going forward, because I think right now that's where Indiana's lacking. But I heard somebody on the radio this week talking about that, and they kind of described Indiana a little bit of deer in headlights. I thought maybe there was just a smidge of that, which I was kind of surprised by, because they hadn't really played that way all year. But let's be honest, I mean, they're at Notre Dame. It's a college football playoff. All eyes were on them. I thought they settled in, but I thought coming out, they were, you got the pick, and then you got the big run, and after that they kind of settled in a little bit, and obviously they had made the run there in the very end of the fourth quarter. I mean, it's disappointing, but overall, I said before this game, it's disappointing. This was a phenomenal season, arguably the best season in the history of the program, and it's a springboard to I think even better things going forward. They've done well in the portal. They filled a lot of their holes, and you can say in some cases they might have upgraded some of those holes. So we'll see. Next year's a whole different team, but I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of. It was a tough loss. This team was supposed to win 5 games at most. They were about a 5-win team. Everything past 6 or 7 wins, like I said all year, was gravy. They weren't supposed to be there. That's not excusing anything, but right now, the way that things have played out, it looks like it's going to be Notre Dame. Right now, my prediction is Notre Dame and Ohio State in the championship. That's what I think it's going to be. They are the two best teams in college football right now. Now we'll see. Penn State, that defense is good. If Abdul Carter's, iffy, that could be a big deal for them. But Notre Dame is playing. Riley Leonard's playing phenomenal. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. And then Ohio State. Wow, I don't know what you can say about them. They are just smoking people. I mean, and Jeremiah Smith is like he looks like Justin Wilson and the guy at Jamar Chase rolled into one in college football. He's unstoppable. So if that turns out to be the case and you lost to the two best teams in college football, that's not bad.
No, it's very hard to complain about. I actually had that same thought too. I think it's going to be Ohio State Notre Dame for the national championship, and at that point, it's like. I mean, obviously Indiana would have liked to win those games, but it's tough to fault them for losing to the two best teams in the nation. The Notre Dame game, I know there's a lot, Matt, coming out of that game with, people were kind of, I wouldn't say they were upset with, but they're questioning the play calling because it looked like at times Indiana was a little conservative offensively. They weren't looking to push the ball until those final really 2 minutes when, the game was already out of reach. Did it feel like that way to you? Because there were some points, especially like when Kirsten opted to punt at midfield, and he obviously said what he said post game about he basically had lost confidence in the offense. But you know, I mean that your season's on the line there. You kind of have to go for it. He opted not to. Did how conservative Indiana was play calling? Did that surprise you a little bit?
Yeah, and I mean, I will say that that's the first time all year that I saw him not be kind of balls to the wall, kind of aggressive. We saw him go for it all year, and in that situation, I think there was like what it was like 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and it was going to be tough to, and they were down what multiple 2 or 3 scores. It was going to be really tough to give yourself any chance. So I was surprised by that. The play calling, I get it. The thing is though when you're Mike Shanahan and you're struggling to block them, it's tough. I'm not making excuses, but it's hard. People say, "Well, run this." Well, the problem is, run more aggressive plays, run deeper routes. Well, if you're gonna run deeper routes, then the O line's got to protect for longer. Rourke's got to go back, and you got an immobile quarterback as it was. So it's tough. They you could throw the ball down the field some, but obviously the weather was a little bit of a factor as well. So I'm not excusing him. Are there play calls he would want back? Sure, there are. But that's a team that we're seeing now that's playing phenomenal football on both sides, not just offensively. Their defense against Georgia was really good. And they made it tough on IU. And that's where I said, going forward, the O line, and I've said it for years. Football is one up front. I don't care what you do from the beginning of time to the end of time. It's always going to be the case. And you've tried it, and it's hard to find those guys. There's not a lot of 6'6", 300-pound human beings walking on the planet who are athletic and can play football. They're just not. So the pickings are slim. You got to try to do the best you can. But yeah, there were plays. There were times it was like third and whatever, and they kind of ran like almost like a draw. I won't say they gave up, but almost, and some of it might have been, what he was just saying. Maybe they expect us to pass. We're going to try to see if we can get 8 or 9 yards on this run, and then they go for it on fourth down. I don't know, but it's hard for me to fault them when you're really struggling to block up front because it basically you're calling plays with one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah. And the other component of that too is what we learned, I believe it was last week, and this is just it's still crazy to me. Curtis Rourke played the entire 2024 season on a torn ACL. He, had the thumb injury midseason where he had to have surgery on it. So you're basically playing with a quarterback who has one knee and a less than fully functioning throwing hand. Now that we know that, knowing what we know now, it's more understandable why he was, as immobile as he was throughout the season. This whole storyline, the biggest thing I can come back to is the fact that it never leaked outside of Memorial Stadium. This injury is wild to me, and I wrote this in my column when that news first broke. It just speaks to the program that they were able to keep this kind of information inside the program. But knowing what we know now, Matt, the fact that that kid played on a torn ACL, I mean, what more can you say about him?
Yeah, and I have a kind of a when I say personal, I tore my ACL when I was in college playing pickup basketball, and I didn't have surgery on it for a couple months because I wanted to wait till after school was out. So I did it. I had it in the summertime when I wouldn't have to miss any class or anything like that. You can live a normal life with a torn ACL, but it's weird because where your knee is, the bottom of your leg, where it kind of attaches to your knee, when you're walking, sometimes it'll just kind of slip, like you'll feel it kind of slip, and you don't have as much strength. I mean, you can't really do athletic stuff. Now, he did. He had that big brace, and I thought you made I think you did on Twitter. I didn't even notice it. He wasn't wearing that brace in the spring, and then he had it on when at some point in fall camp. And there were whispers that he had gotten injured in fall camp, but when he didn't miss anything and they didn't say anything, not that that's a big shock, but he didn't miss anything. I didn't. I just kind of dismissed it. And I've seen quarterbacks wear braces in the past, but usually what I should have picked up on, usually the brace is on the plant leg. If you're a right-handed quarterback, the left leg, because that's the one when you're putting in the ground as you're throwing, and if that gets hit, you want some support. His was, I believe, the right leg, which is his push-off leg. So that it would have been backwards, and I just didn't. It didn't occur to me. But like I said, having a torn ACL, knowing what that's like, I will say the rehab is worse than the injury because the rehab is brutal. his rehab will be a lot better than mine because he's a college athlete and all that. But anyway, the fact that he did that, it's unbelievable. Like I just remember with mine, I had kind of lost strength. I could walk normally and all that, but you really couldn't. I don't even know how he even barely ran. It's a one of the more remarkable stories, maybe the most remarkable story that I've have been known about with this program since I've been covering it. And I just you just don't hear about this. That's nuts. You'll hear about linemen playing with all kinds of injuries or whatever, but this is a quarterback with his push off leg. Um, just kudos to him. And like you said, the fact that it didn't get out, part of me is not totally surprised after I've seen how Kurt Cincinnati does things. My guess is the only people who knew were like the coaches. I mean, I'm guessing there were like people like support staff in that program who had absolutely no idea that happened. They might have wondered when he all of a sudden was wearing a brace, but they probably didn't know. That was probably literally only talked about among the coaches, people like that who are really close to the players. So phenomenal story. And the fact that he was ninth in Heisman voting, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, absolutely sensational stuff.
Yeah, yeah, hats off to him. And thinking back to even like when we got Rourke for the media availabilities, I mean, I don't know if you can remember a time. I don't think he ever alluded to any knee pain, anything like that. I did remember seeing like I'm a very visual person, so I remember like taking visual snapshots in my head of Rourke wearing that brace, and I was like, huh, that's kind of odd. And I remember that from the very first game. I was like, oh, that's kind of odd. I didn't remember that in the spring game. I had to go back actually and look through the spring game photos, and he obviously didn't have the brace there. But I never thought of anything of the brace. I kind of thought it was more had to do with the 2022 torn ACL that he had at Ohio. Maybe it was kind of flaring up again. But
Yeah.
obviously we couldn't foresee anything like this
Yeah,
season.
and in the past, I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure IU quarterbacks at times have worn, even though they never had knee injury, they'll wear it on their left knee just to give them some. And linemen wear it. We see it all the time. The linemen wear those on both knees, just because they have guys falling in their legs. So him wearing a brace, but after you post, I'm like, shoot, that should have been on the left knee if it was for support, like protection. When I say support, like protection, just to protect him if somebody rolls into your knee. Now, somebody really rolls into it hard, you're going to still get injured. But it was on his right knee. I just never. I mean, and egg on my face. I should have paid more attention and been more alert to that. So, but like we said, just I mean, if you're an NFL team, I'm not saying he's a first round pick, but how do you not? If you want a developmental quarterback in the fourth round or whatever it may be, how do you not look at him and be like, this kid's amazing? Like, I know he's 24, call him a kid, he's 24, whatever, but that dude's amazing. Like, how could you not want him, not just beyond his physical abilities, but that's incredible toughness. And that shows you how much it meant to him to play for this team. He could have sat out and got another year. It would have been a bummer for him, but he could have been kind of selfish about it, and he wasn't. It's like I said, it's just remarkable story.
Yeah. For his sake too, because he's obviously having the ACL revision surgery, I believe is what they called it. I don't know the timeline on that. Obviously, we don't know the full extent of what the ACL like partially torn, full tear. But I hope it doesn't knock him down the draft boards too much. Not that he would probably not be competing for a starting job next year. I highly doubt that. But even just the fact that he could go somewhere in a good situation where top backup type situation where maybe a couple years down the line he could be fighting for a starting job. I hope this doesn't affect him too much. And we've been around Curtis Rourke. I mean, he's going to kill it in interviews when he gets in front of execs and stuff. So you know, we'll see how teams kind of view his ACL situation, but day three pick is probably most likely right now.
Yeah.
Hopefully he doesn't slide, into the undrafted territory because Indiana hasn't had a drafted quarterback. I mean, you can count Michael Penix, I guess, if you want, but obviously haven't had a drafted quarterback since Nate Sudfeld, so it would be good to kind of get that monkey off your back too.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, I'll be a little bit shocked if he falls. I know the injury could push him down, but I think he goes early on day three. I think day three. I think it's first day is one, round one, then two and three. So day three is 4 through 7. I mean, I think I can see him, by the fifth round being picked, and hopefully he does. I just, I mean, he is. I right now, I follow the NFL. I have fantasy teams on. The quarterback play in the NFL is terrible. Outside of there's a lot of bad quarterback play. I'm a Colts fan. Trust me, the quarterback play is terrible. And there is no doubt in my mind that he can. at the very least be a quality backup for a really long time and be a guy that at times, if you have to plug him in and start, he can go out there and win a game for you.
Yeah. So are you off the Anthony Richardson train?
Yeah, I'm off of everything. The Colts, they're terrible. Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen's a clown. Robert Ursay needs to stop popping pills and let somebody else run the team. They're a joke.
Well, we know Matt's never getting a Colts beat writing job after that. Yeah, so we'll see what happens with Rourke. Hopefully that goes well. We did get some guys, NFL decisions because obviously the draft's coming up here soon, pro days, combine. The two big ones are Mikael Kamara coming back, Aiden Fisher. I never really thought Fisher was too big of a concern to leave, but he's coming back as well. Those two guys, Matt Kamara actually announced on Christmas Day, which I thought was pretty cool. A little gift to Indiana fans there, and then Fisher. I think actually think Fisher was before Kamara, if I'm not wrong on his decision. But to get those two guys back, Matt, just massive for that defense. You get Brian Haynes back, who yeah, I don't know when they announced the Burrows Award, but I still think Brian Haynes should win that award. But to get the leader of the defensive line back, leader of the linebacker room back, just massive.
Yeah, it is, and I mean, especially when you're losing obviously Jalen Walker, he's out of eligibility. Um, talking about Aiden Fisher here, getting him back. I mean, he's the headset guy. He's the coach on the field. Huge. He's a terrific player. 118 tackles, I think. So obviously, incredibly productive. And then, Kamara was a stud. I mean, arguably the best player on the defense. Just a stud. Total. I mean, you talk about an impact player. That's what it is. I mean, the tackles for loss, the sacks. And not only that, we would talk to him after games or whatever. Incredibly well spoken, really, really smart guy. You could tell he's a guy that I guarantee people in that locker room look up to. They follow his lead. I mean, as a coach, I mean, I'm guessing as a coach, this is the dream player for you. We talked about it all season. I mean, he was an Iron Man. Hopefully they can, you want him to be an impact player next year, but you'd like to maybe lessen the load a little bit. And he's mentioned that he's moving to the stud position, which was played by Linnell Carr. He's going to drop a little bit of weight, which I think a big part of that's probably going to help. It's being done because it'll help him for the next level. Because we've talked about this size wise as a DN, a strong side DN. He doesn't really fit in the NFL. But if he can go down and play kind of that pass rusher, which he's shown he can do, it makes him more marketable. And it could help IU overall too. If you can get another guy on the other side who can get after the quarterback as well. So two huge decisions. From those guys who could have gone pro and obviously decided to come back. And I will say Kamara was a little bit surprised. I had heard maybe a week before that people thought he might be leaving. I don't want to say for sure, but it seemed like maybe he was maybe leaning that way. So, if that was the case, whoever was able to convince him to stay, kudos, because that is a monster, retention for Indiana.
Yeah, and you have to imagine too the price tag to get him back.
Yeah.
Probably had to pay a pretty penny to get him back. But that was one of the things I did wonder about was the position change. Now him going, he was on the Hoosier Hysterics podcast, which is a great podcast interview. If you guys haven't listened yet, it's up on our page at Peegs.com. But if you he mentioned in that with the position change that he didn't say it was going to be a full-time switch. So he probably will be playing strong side defensive end a little bit, and switching between that and the stud, throughout games. But last year we saw him playing with his hand in the ground the entire time, and he did drop into coverage a little bit, but not as much as we saw Linnell Carr do.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I'll be curious about is can he prove that he's a capable sort of outside linebacker type where he can drop into coverage because that's going to be one of those swing skills for him that's going to kind of decide where he ultimately lands in the NFL.
Yeah, and one thing, I should probably go back and look at this. But when he was at JMU in 23, they had a really good. I can't remember the guy's last name. I want to say it was. They had a really
Jalen
good
Green?
edge guy. Is it Green?
Yeah.
And I think I want to say he either got drafted or he got picked up by the Eagles. In last year's NFL draft, he was a rookie this year, and I'm not sure if how they use them because it's the same defense. And I should go back and look at some of their film from 23 to see if he played a little bit of stud. When he was at JMU, I would think he's probably got some, at least snaps. Maybe they're in practice. Like I said, I'm not sure about games, But yeah, it will be that. That is a big part of it. And it's not like he's got to drop a ton of weight. I want to say he played around 260 or 265, and Linnell Carr wasn't a whole lot smaller than that. I just think some of it is just leaning, maybe leaning up a little bit, just so you're a little bit more athletic and can move better, laterally and all that kind of stuff. And like you said, dropping into coverage, we saw that happen. Obviously with Carr to not great results and I think it was the Ohio State game where they got him a few times down the field. So, but yeah, that'll be a big part of it. The NFL will be watching that because if you're playing that position, you're probably going to have to maybe drop into coverage depending on how an NFL team runs their defense. But regardless, it's wherever he plays, he will be an impact player in 2025. There's no doubt about that.
And then the other major return that we haven't talked about is D'Angelo Pons. Now, obviously, he still had a year of eligibility before he could even go to the draft, but if he would have gone to the portal, you have to think every single team in the nation would have been after him. He decides to stay at Indiana. Once again, probably a guy that didn't wasn't cheap to keep around, but nonetheless, Indiana keeps him around, and that is huge. First of all, I feel like Rod Ojong, the cornerbacks coach, hasn't got enough props because he's done a phenomenal job with that room, and they're keeping him around. Indiana is. And the fact that Pons wants to stay around and play for him speaks a lot about him and how he's developing him. But Pons in general, I mean that's a guy where at this point he might be better than Tywone Mullen. And Tywone Mullen when he came through was inarguably the best cornerback Indiana's seen in maybe a decade.
Yeah, I think I was actually thinking about this the other day. I think Pons is a better cover guy. I mean, neither guy's real big. Although Pons, for a smaller guy, he's not scared to go up and tackle. But I think he's probably a better, especially in man coverage. I think he's probably a little bit better than Taiwan was. Taiwan, they used him a little bit differently. I mean, he blitzed more. I don't remember them blitzing Pons a whole lot, if at all. And it's obviously two different defenses as well. So, but yeah, I think that's a pretty good comparison. And obviously Tywone Mullen, I know, obviously his last year didn't go great, but he had a major impact on this program when they had some good years. And obviously Pons last year he was phenomenal. I mean, he was so good. If you look at his, I know PFF isn't everything, but his PFF grades were phenomenal. Like he was high level, like one of the best corners, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country. And like you said, if he would have gone into the portal, it would have been a free agent frenzy for him. He would have definitely got some good offers.
Yeah. All right. Last item here before we get into all the transfer portal stuff that's happened over the last few weeks. Chandler Whitmer, he is officially on board with Indiana as a new quarterbacks coach, co-offensive coordinator. Very impressive resume, coming from a background where he was a GA at Ohio State. Obviously coming from the Falcons this past season as I think they called him the pass game specialist, I want to say. So, he worked with Penix there in Atlanta as well. So, this is the type of hire that Kurt Cignetti, I kind of figured he would lean towards a younger coach that was kind of hungry, for a job like that, sort of a Tino Sinceri type, where he's trying to break into the coaching business. And they paid up for him. I think it was north of $700,000 they paid for him for a guy who's never been a quarterbacks coach before. So, and then Kurt Cignetti said, in the press release that he came highly recommended. Chandler Whitmer did. So. You have to think if Kurt Cignetti is sold on him, then he must be pretty good. But very impressive background, and I like that he is young too, because that means he's hungry. That means he hasn't seen, or he's still looking to sort of cut his teeth.
Yeah, like you said, his background's great. I mean, he's been at Clemson, been at Ohio State, worked with some good quarterbacks at both places. And then the Chargers, he was there with when they got Justin Herbert, and then in Atlanta. Be interesting just if we ever get a chance to talk to him. I'd like to just ask him, what his thoughts, about Penix, because Michael got to play here at the end of the year and has shown a lot of the stuff that he showed in college, and just his thoughts on working with Michael. But it's a Kurt Cignetti hire. When he hired Tino Sinceri had never. He had even actually less experience. If you want to, I think he basically only been really a GA, and he never worked in the pros, as far as I know. So Whitmer has, obviously got that pro experience, and then obviously, working in college, similar to what Sinceri. So, and like you said, he's young. I thought it was interesting. I think he was a model for a couple of years
Yeah.
after college. So, that's kind of interesting. But uh, and then gets into coaching, and like you said, young. Hasn't, I don't think he's ever probably been out recruiting, just because GAs, they recruit, but they don't go out off campus. But I don't think that'll be a problem for him. I mean, he's going to walk into a living room and say, "Hey, I worked with Justin Fields. I worked with Justin Herbert. I worked with, Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix and these other guys at Clemson. I've been in the NFL. So he recruiting is about relationships. I'm guessing he's got a great personality. Young guy who'll really connect with high school kids, and even obviously portal guys. So I know that he was a part of recruiting Fernando Mendoza, and that the Mendoza family was impressed with in their conversations with him. So yeah, I think it's going to be a strong hire, and it'll be. I don't think the offense is going to miss a beat, and it'll be kind of fun to watch his kind of career, take off like he did with Sinceri.
Yeah. There was a question on the board when the hire was officially announced about, the sort of the titles and why they gave him the co-OC title as well, which that's something Chris Kennedy has done. Obviously, he did it with Tino Cincinnati, but sort of attaching that co-OC title. Now, Mike Shanahan is still going to call plays. At least we'd expect him to. But that extra title, I don't know if you have any more insight into it, Matt, but just it's a nice feather in the cap to be able to say you were a co-OC somewhere as opposed to just the QB's coach. So like I said on the board, I wouldn't read too much into it, but he'll probably you'd assume he's going to just slide into what Tino Cincinnati did, which is be down on the sidelines and sort of lead that offense from the sidelines while Shanahan's in the booth, and then also help with the game week prep.
Yeah, I would think so. And I remember when Kevin Wilson was a coach, and we would talk about titles. Some of it is, it's you give a guy the title, it kind of gives you, it kind of justifies paying him a little bit more. And also he also did it. He was an assistant, so it helps these guys. I mean, listen, his goal, I guarantee, is to be an OC and hopefully and probably be a head coach one day, and it helps them. It looks good on the resume. It's a resume builder for him, and it's not like he's not going to be earning that role. He'll be doing stuff. And when Cignetti said when he went after Sinceri, he went after him because he was working at Alabama when Steve Sarkisian was the OC, and it was Cignetti said, I wanted to steal some stuff that Sarkisian was doing because I really liked what they were doing on offense. That was one thing that attracted me to Tino. I'll be curious if maybe there were some things at his previous stops, and maybe even with the Falcons, that Cignetti was like, you know what, I kind of like what they're doing. I want to kind of, maybe steal a few of the things. And so what better way? That's not the only reason why you hire him, but maybe that's one of the things that he looked at when he looked at Chandler Whitmer and saw his experience. I mean, he's obviously worked with great offenses in his past in the pros and in college. So, but yeah, the title thing, this is Mike Shanahan's offense with obviously Kurt Cincinnati having a significant amount of input. But Chandler Whitmer will, he'll be part of game planning. I'm sure on the field, Cincinnati might sometimes probably said the head said, "Hey, Mike, I like this. Let's try this." Whitmer will probably be given the same kind of freedom. Just at the end of the day, it's Shanahan's call, but he's going to listen to those guys. He's going to lean on his assistants because that's what a good coordinator does.
Yeah. So that will be interesting to see. Indiana right now is at 5 quarterbacks. So there was some attrition. Taven Jackson did leave, and that gets into our portal discussion here. Um, I guess we can start with Taven Jackson leaving. I kind of felt I kind of felt that way with after they brought in Fernando Mendoza. It's like, does Taven Jackson want to stay and be a backup for another year, especially with only 2 years of eligibility left? It seems like he found a really good landing spot at UCF, and UCF is basically bringing the band back together with Scott Frost there. So hopefully it works out for him. The quarterbacks room in general, I guess it's a good place to start, Matt. You lose Taven Jackson. You got the news last week that Tyler Cherry suffered a non-contact knee injury in the I believe it was the lead up to the college football playoff game. So you're down him as well. It seems like, at least for the foreseeable future. So you have 4 quarterbacks. 2 of them are transfers. One of them is an incoming freshman, and then Alberto Mendoza is really the only healthy returning scholarship guy. That room as a whole, we'll start with Fernando Mendoza because that was just massive.
Oh, it was huge. And it it was obviously drawn out. There was a lot of drama. Um, we found out after the fact. I mean, a lot of this stuff I can't report, but he came in. Trying to remember the date. It was Thursday. It was a Thursday to Saturday. I think it was it the week before they played Notre Dame? Anyways, he came in a Thursday to Saturday. And then he ended up taking that visit to Missouri. And then there was obviously talk about Georgia maybe making a push late. So, they had to fight off some schools. Obviously, UCLA was after him with Tino Sinceri. But it's huge. I mean, I don't know right now that he's the passer that Rourke is, but he's not far off. Like watching him, at counting it, I'm not saying it's the exact same offense, but he can definitely throw the ball. But what he brings is, I watched. I was actually walking on the treadmill last night and got my phone and was watching his highlights. His ability to escape for a tall guy, he's pretty mobile. He moves well. I don't know if you maybe call him shifty, but for a taller guy, he has got some shiftiness to him. But when he breaks the contain and can run, he can definitely hurt you with his legs. He's got pretty good speed. So I'm not saying they're going to run him a ton, but obviously you weren't running. And I don't know that you would run a Rourke a ton, even if he didn't have the knee injury. Obviously, we didn't know about during the season. Maybe a little bit. He ran more at Ohio, but I could see, 3, 4, 5 times a game, Mendoza next year putting it in the belly of the running back and then keeping it, if the DN crashes down, kind of what Taven did when he played this year. It's a huge get. I mean, they really needed to get, a top quarterback out of the portal, and they got, I think he was ranked third in our rankings, 247's rankings. He's right up there with the best guys in the portal. He was sacked 41 times. The O-line, Kyle, was terrible. They were not good, and he carried them to a bowl game. And it was other guys too. They had other good players. They've had guys go in the portal, get picked up. But he was terrific, and it's a monster get for this program.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's going to be really good, especially his legs. I did that film breakdown on him. Cal did run a lot of RPO type stuff, and even in the red zone, they ran a lot of read, not a lot, but they did run read options with Mendoza, and there were a couple where he was able to get in the end zone there. So that should open up the offense a lot more than what they're able to do with Curtis Rourke. At least mobility wise, and just being able to kind of get out of the pocket and do different things with that as well. Sticking with the quarterback room, Jacob Bell, incoming freshman. Indiana got him to flip from Ball State. Looks to be more of a developmental piece right now, depth piece. And then Grant Wilson, the Old Dominion transfer. Those two guys, probably going to be backups next year. Wouldn't be surprised if Wilson's probably QB2, unless Alberto Mendoza obviously has a good offseason. Anything on those two guys, Matt? Just general thoughts.
Yeah. Wilson's coming in to compete, but he knows the situation. I mean, they paid I've heard more than seven figures to get Fernando Mendoza. Wilson, I mean, he's not going to come in and just take a back seat, but he understands this is Mendoza's job to lose, and he's okay with that. What I've been told on Grant Wilson is, and he had a nice season in 23. He got hurt this year and only played like 3 games. He had a nice season in 23 for Old Dominion, transferred there from Fordham. His goal is to be a coach. And I think that's one thing that attracted him to come to Indiana is to play for Kirk Cinetti, to play for Mike Shanahan, and then obviously Chandler Whitmer, a guy who's had experience in college and the pros. And so, he's going to come in and compete. I will be surprised if he's not the number 2. I think that's one reason why they wanted a veteran, and they like Alberto and they like Cherry. And you mentioned Cherry's, the injury deal. But they like those guys. But the bottom line is between the two of them, they've taken about freaking 10 snaps. I mean, they've in a game, and it was all mop up time against, Western Illinois. So they've basically not played. Wilson's played. If you would need to, like if you had a situation like you had this year with Rourke, where he had to sit out a game because of the thumb injury and you had to go to the backup, Wilson's a guy, you could feel pretty comfortable saying, hey, he can go out there and maybe not run the exact same stuff, but we can do a lot of the same things like they did with Taven, where we can still be really competitive and have a chance to win the game. But those guys are the future. And then Jacob Bell, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Alberto Mendoza, in that he wasn't heavily recruited, committed to Ball State, had a number of G5 offers. But I watched his film. He can really he throws the ball well. He can his legs are good. He can use his legs to make plays. We'll see what happens. You never know. But I think this is another good developmental quarterback, and some of the attrition there probably helped him get this spot. It'll be interesting. I don't know if he's going to come in the fall. I think that's at least the last time I heard that was to be determined, but that was like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So maybe they made that. I'm sure they made that determination by now since classes start next week. But whether it comes in the fall or in the summer, it's a good developmental quarterback. Kind of developed behind Mendoza, the younger Mendoza and Cherry. But I like him. I think he's got a chance to be a nice player for IU down the road.
Yeah. So Indiana is at five scholarship quarterbacks now with those two. Roman Purcell, he was a walk-on, but he actually he did dress for a lot of games last year, but he is also transferring out. So also worth noting. Let's move on to running backs. My favorite pickup of the offseason for Indiana so far, Roman Hemby out of Maryland. 4 years there. He was a 3-year, he might have been actually a 4-year starter there, but you're getting a guy with significant Big Ten experience. He's big, he's fast. A terrific pass catcher out of the backfield. And then you pair him with Lee Beebe, who, he was a third team All-American conference, that is, last year, UAB. The Hemby pickup, we did talk about Beebe last time we did our podcast, Matt, because he was already in the mix. But Hemby, he has the makings of a guy that's going to be able to step in right away, take that sort of lead bell cow back type role. And his pass catching is going to be something I'm really curious to see how Indiana utilizes because I think he has almost over 1,000 career receiving yards for a running back. That is insane. I love that pickup for Indiana.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, outside of Mendoza on Fernando Mendoza on offense, I thought this is the guy that's going to make the biggest impact. I said it when I did my depth chart projection. Obviously, it's very very early projection, but just kind of where I see things. I think he's the most explosive back Indiana's had since Tevin Coleman. He is. I mean, he was a track guy in high school, really good times in the 100 and those kind of things. I mean, this guy, we saw it. I know it was ref aided on that 75-yard touchdown against IU, but his speed is legit. Like he gets a crease, and then like you said, they use the backs a little bit in the pass game, but he almost at times is like another receiver. And I think BB is another a guy who can also help you a little bit as a receiver out of the backfield. I like both these pickups, but Hemby, I thought Ellison and Lawton were terrific this year. But it's like, Embiid's kind of got the explosiveness of Elijah Green, but the size of, the guys, of an Ellison and a lot. He's a little bit bigger guy. I'm excited to see him in this offense. I got to think Coach Miller, the running backs coach, and Shanahan are really, really, chomping at the bit to see what he can do in this offense. They get him in space and get him the ball because I think he is going to really have some huge games.
Yeah. Now his career at Maryland was kind of a weird one because 2021 he had 17 carries, didn't play a whole ton. 2020 his freshman year. 2022 that was when he was I think it was a all freshman all American freshman. 989 yards, 10 touchdowns. It really looked like he was going to become a guy that was going to be a star at Maryland. And then the next 2 years in 23 and 24, 680 yards, 607 yards. So a pretty steep drop off there. Now Maryland's offensive line has been pretty terrible. Last year it was, and then the year before, it was shaky as well. So I don't know how much that played into it, but that's probably something that's going to get asked once we're able to talk to him is, what happened during those, the previous two Maryland years, because that is a little concerning that there was such a steep drop off. But then again, you have that body of work that okay, he can be a close to 1,000-yard rusher, so we know it's in there somewhere. But I'm curious as to how that happened, why that happened, from his point of view.
Yeah, and I think this year Maryland was not good. I think they were like 4-8.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and they were playing from behind. I think a lot. So you're not going to be running the ball is not going to be something. Just looking at his stats, you mentioned he was 5.3 yards per carry in 22, 4.8 in 23, 4.5 this year. Not a huge drop off. 4.5 is still pretty darn good. To me, the production dropping off is maybe more about the offense around him than him himself. The guys who, but like, you look at this, 40 receptions this year, 38 in 23, 33 and 22. That's what 100, my math's right, 111, I think.
Yeah.
That's terrific. So I think he's going to be a heck of a player. I don't worry too much about the yards, the drop off in yards. I think, like I said, Maryland was a mess this year. And when you're behind all the time, you're not going to be throwing the ball a ton. You're going to be running it more than anything. But like they're showing like he had a touchdown catch against IU, had the long run. He's a really natural pass catcher, good route runner. So I think it's a heck of a pickup. You would only kind of wish you had him for a couple of years instead of one, but he's a really really good player, and I think he's going to do huge things in their offense.
Yeah, and the way that Indiana operated last year with the running backs, obviously, with Lawton and Justice Ellison, they basically split carries evenly. So, it's probably not a situation where Hemby is going to be, a three down workhorse back, but he definitely has it in there if they need him to. Like, we saw in that Washington game with Justice Ellison where really had to take on what was it, like 29 carries. So he has that in his bag too if he needs. And then the running back room as well with Kalon Black returning, you get Kobe Martin back. Sean Cuono is coming in, so that's a really solid five-man group right there at running back. Let's move on to receiver here, Matt. The most recent one, Indiana basically did a one-for-one swap with Michigan. You get Tyler Morris, a speedster out of this, probably gonna be a slot guy. Donovan McCulley going to Michigan, obviously, and then you add Mekhi Jackson as well out of App State. Those two guys, I like. I like what they bring to the table, especially in that they're playmakers. They have speed. They can take the top off the defense.
Yeah, and I said this with Morris. It's I think I did it my special teams thing. It's like killing two birds with one stone because he's been a punt returner in college, and obviously that's not been talked about. But Miles Price was really really good for Indiana this year as a punt returner. And they need to replace that. And honestly, you might have been looking at like a freshman like LeBron Bond in that role. So, like you said, slot guy. He had a big play. I think it was against Alabama in I want to say the semifinal game where he took it like 38 yards. Took a pass and went third down the sideline for a touchdown. He was a big time recruit out of high school. I think he out of Illinois. Yeah, it was because he played with J.J. McCarthy in high school at the Nazareth Academy. So yeah, it's a good pickup. I mean, his stats don't jump off the page. But I mean, even when Michigan won the national title, I mean, McCarthy's stats weren't that great in 23 for a guy who got drafted as high as he did. They under this Michigan staff, especially under Harbaugh, they ran the ball. Then this year, their quarterback play was not great. I mean, if they had a decent quarterback at all, they're probably a 10-win team. They had terrible quarterback play, so I don't look too much at that. He's 5'11", 185, perfect slot guy, fast, quick, shifty. So I think he'll fit right in. And then Mekhi Jackson kind of reminds me of Omar Cooper, Miles Cross. I went back and watched. I didn't see him a lot in the slot, but I'm wondering if he can play there. He was basically all outside in all the highlights I saw this year from Appalachian State. But big play guy. I can also give you a little bit as a returner, has done some punt return and kick return, so that can maybe help you on special teams. But two guys, I mean, they're similar to me to what they got last year. Guys who have been productive in college, and you should be able to plug them in, and they'll be productive and probably better than what they've been in their past in Indiana's offense, especially with Morris. I think he's in a much more wide receiver friendly offense than he was at Michigan.
Yeah, I agree with that. And this is a guy that was ranked top 100 in his high school class. Now, obviously, Curtis Gennady does the whole production over potential deal, but you can't take away that kind of playmaking and speed and athleticism, and that's what the staff seems to be focused on this year is really adding that kind of those traits in the receiver room. So you get Elijah Surratt back, you get Omar Cooper back, get EJ Williams back, you pair him with Morris and Jackson. That's a really nice top five there. Matt, do you know, is Indiana looking to add more receivers at this point, or do you think are they pretty set with the nine they have?
I think they're probably set. I mean, if a guy comes out there and let's be honest, in today's world, it's not just about you wanting him and him wanting you. You got to, if he's looking for an NIL deal, you got to have the money, and they've got other positions to look at, and there's not obviously an endless supply of cash, so you got to try to manage that the best you can. They've missed on some guys because of that. Guys have asked for more than they were willing to pay. Guys that really could have helped them, but you got to be, Signetti understands what he needs, but I think if there was somebody, but I won't be shocked if they had another receiver. I would be surprised.
Yeah.
My understanding was it was three coming in. You got Morris, you got Jackson, and quite honestly, EJ Williams is like getting a portal guy because you weren't expecting him to come back. You were recruiting to replace him, so him coming back is like your third portal receiver, if you want to look at it that way. So my guess is they're probably done. But like you never know if somebody's out there late, especially in the spring, and you feel like you got an open roster spot and he can come in and help you. Maybe and you can fit him in, into your NIL budget, so to speak. Maybe there is, but I think they're focused on other positions right now.
Mhm. All right, moving on to tight end here. Indiana just one tight end addition right now, but they've, obviously they've had a couple guys on campus as well that haven't announced or that have gone elsewhere. But Wisconsin transfer Riley Nowakowski, he's in the fold. Brody Kosin transferred out. He's headed to Miami of Ohio. Nowakowski, he started his career as a walk-on at Wisconsin, I believe as an outside linebacker, then moved to fullback, then to tight end. So he's gonna, he's probably gonna fill a lot of what James Bamba did. And James Bamba's obviously coming back, but in sort of a blocking specialist role. So this is that's sort of my concern with tight end is I think you need another guy who you can rely on to be a pass catcher. Because Nowakowski didn't do a whole lot of that at Wisconsin, but for what it is, you lose Zach Horton, and obviously he was a tremendous blocker. So to get a guy that is similarly skilled in that area, I think is pretty good for Indiana.
Yeah, and I mean they're not done at tight end, or at least they're trying not to be done at tight end. They want to add another guy, but I think Nowakowski can give you a lot of the things, the kind of the blue collar stuff that you got from Zach Horton, the blocking. I mean his PFF blocking grades are really really good. Now Zach Horton's and some of his blocking grades weren't that great, so take that with a grain of salt because my eye test said he was a better blocker than what they thought. But anyways, he'll give you a lot of that. I mean, so he's not typical size 6'1", but 240. Like you said, started as a walk-on outside linebacker, and I'm sure they got some feedback on him from Bostad. And Bostad at one time was the linebackers coach before they moved him back to the line. So I wonder if maybe he coached him or recruited him. I'd have to go back and look at the timeline. I'm not exactly sure on that, but I mean, he would have known about him being up there at Wisconsin. He seems like the typical Wisconsin guy. He starts as a walk-on, ends up being a productive, good player for him. So I think it's a nice pickup. And he's used to winning. He's used to the Big Ten, so I think he'll fit in seamlessly.
Yeah. So who in the tight end room, who are the guys Indiana has brought in for visits so far? And do we know if they made decisions yet?
Yeah, they brought in Alex Bauman from Tulane. Trying to think who else they brought in. I thought there was somebody else. He was the guy they were really trying to go after. I've heard that was he ended up at Miami. I think that was they kind of at the last minute, excused themselves, so to speak, from the table because the money got more than what they were willing to pay. I think they'll either have another tight end visit or one is probably already visited. But they're still going after somebody else at the tight end position, and we'll see how that shakes out. But they definitely want to add another body, another player, another experienced veteran player at that spot for the 25 season.
Mhm. All right. Offensive line here. Let's go to Indiana with two transfer commits so far with Zen Mikulski out of Ohio State and then Khalil Benson returning to Bloomington. Spent 1 year at Colorado, obviously started his career at IU, now back at IU. These two are interesting to me because Mikulski, he really didn't have, he's only started one game and he did not play well in that one game this past season at Ohio State. But he has the build you're looking for. He has that sort of pedigree you're looking for as a former four-star. And then Cleo Benson, we know what he could do. We saw him. One of those guys that was also highly touted coming out of high school. Started, I believe it would have been his redshirt sophomore year. He started at IU. Last year he was at Colorado and then back to IU. Do you think both of those guys are plug and play starters right away, Matt? Obviously they'll have to earn everything, but do you think that's kind of how it shakes out right now?
That's my guess right now. And I mean, I did my depth chart. We'll see. I think Benson. He started. He played for Bostad in 23. Started I think all 12 games at right tackle. The year before, before Bostad came in, he played more guard. And then last year at Colorado, he started the first 4 games, got injured, played the first 4 games, I think at right guard, but he also played some at tackle and played some at left guard. A lot will depend on what do you do on the interior because obviously Drew Evans is kind of an unknown. If he's healthy, Drew Evans is going to play. I mean, Cignetti really praised him during the season, but that's a big question. He had the Achilles tear late. It was like middle of November, early November. So if you're let's just say it's 10 months, he's going to not be ready for the start of the season. And I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying if you hypothetically say 10 months, so what do you do at that position? Does Bray Lynch go from right guard to center? That's my guess, but that's just a guess. And then you could plug Benson in at right guard. I think Benson fits better at guard than Mikowski because he's played there. As far as I know, Mikowski hasn't been at least not in games. He's only not played a whole lot. And I don't know if they've ever used him at guard at Ohio State in practice. I have no idea, but I would assume he's been. I think he's the right tackle, and Benson's your right guard. Lynch is your center, and then left guard. You hope and pray that Evans is back. If not, you either try to find somebody else from the portal, or it could be a young guy, a Johnny, Demola Johnny, or Austin Liebfried, or if Vinny Cable's back and healthy, maybe he's in the mix.
Yeah. Yeah, so the offensive line, I still think Indiana could do with one more experienced, at least upperclassman type. Just insurance, because like you said, we don't know what's going to happen with Drew Evans. I still feel like Indiana could benefit from one more, but you do get Carter Smith back on the left side to block the blind side, which obviously is where the offensive line starts. So that's very important. And then we you'd have to think that Bray Lynch is going to kick inside the center, which is where he spent a lot of time before he moved to guard last year. But yeah, that last guard opening and then the right tackle spot is going to be huge for Indiana as the offseason rolls along. And spring ball will probably tell us a lot too in that regard. All right, defensive line, Matt. This is a spot where Indiana did a lot of its work early. Haven't really heard a whole ton since then. You get Dominique Ratcliffe out of Texas State, and then Jose Wheeler out of Western Kentucky. Both guys are probably going to be DTs, or three techs in the interior. Good pickups. I think they fill sort of the CJ West, James Carpenter roles in sort of their body types and stuff. But you're still without an edge rusher, so. Still more work to be done on the defensive line, I think.
Yeah, Wheeler can play nose or three tech. My guess right now is he's the starting nose, and then Ratcliffe is probably next to him at three tech. But remember, Tyreek Tucker played really well last year in a reserve role. Marcus Burris has got the talent. He's just been the consistency hasn't been there. And then there's also Mario Landino. Although I won't be shocked, I think Landino will play both on the edge and then maybe some inside. He might be one of those things where he starts out on the edge in your base defense. And then if it gets into like a kind of a passing situation, maybe to get more pass rushers, you move him to the three tech so you can get more pass rushers on the field. But yeah, both these guys are productive. I mean, Wheeler, 74 tackles for a D tackle is just crazy. That's not really, you don't usually see that. And I think he also, I can't remember which one of them played a ton of snaps. So good players. Both were guys that other schools really wanted, P4 schools. So I think they'll step right in and kind of pick up. I mean, you got big shoes to fill. CJ West was terrific. James Carpenter is terrific. But I think these guys can step in and give you, pretty close to the same kind of production that you got from those guys.
Yeah. So the interior is set. Now the edge group, Matt. This is where this is probably my biggest not concern right now. You could say safeties maybe. I still think you need to add another legit, top line starter guy. If Mikael Kamara is going to play a majority of his snaps, the stud, you're going to have to go out and get a really good strong side defensive end, because we saw how much Kamara meant to the defensive line at that spot. Have you heard anything as to any edges they're going after? Now there is obviously the spring portal cycle, so guys could open up there, but it really feels like Indiana could really needs at least one more guy there.
Yeah, I mean, right now their best bet is Bradley Weaver from Ohio, and he's been talked about on the board. I think he's getting close to a decision. He was terrific. I don't have his stats in front of me, but he was terrific this year. I think I can't remember the bowl game they played in. He was the player of the game or defensive player, defensive MVP. I'm hearing it's IU, and this is not in particular order. This is just the three schools: Indiana, Wisconsin, and Rutgers. And I think he's getting close. I think we'll get a decision this week, maybe as early as today. But we'll see on that. He would be a really good. I think he's a 1-year guy, but he could play that strong side DN. And I think also, if this is me, and I'm not a coach. I'm not at practice. I would probably leave Landino on the edge for one more year because I think the depth is better inside, and he could help you more. Even if he's the backup, the other guy I really think is going to take a step this year. And I'm not saying he's going to play a ton, but I think Daniel Ndukwe is going to be a nice rotational piece at that stud position. We saw what he did on special teams. He's incredibly explosive. He blocked 2 punts, and he's a really explosive, athletic guy. And I think he's learning from Kamara this year is going to be great for his development. I think he'll be a guy that you'll see them rotate in a little bit at that spot. But yeah, you're right. They could really use another guy. I mean, if worst case scenario, if you go into next year with Landino as your strong side DN, I think you'll be okay. But you'd like to have an older guy that so he's not playing. He has to play like 70 whatever many snaps, 70% of the snaps or whatever it is every game, and he can kind of still kind of be developed while also playing. But Weaver would be a heck of a pickup if they can get him. Like I said, they're in the mix, and hopefully they can pull it off and add him to the roster. Because if you do that and you've got him on the edge with Kamara and then the guys you brought inside, linebacker, excuse me, they haven't had anybody, but I'm not sure they need to. And then your secondary has come around really well. This defense could be as good as it was this year. It may have a chance to be better next year. This could be a really, really salty defense to play against.
Yeah, it's not, definitely not going to be easy. And I like the Ndukwe shout out. I've also been waiting for Tadarius Collins to
Yeah.
break out. He was injured for a lot of this past year, so that obviously didn't help things. But if those two guys, if even one of them can make a jump, that's going to be huge for Indiana off the edge. And then you get those two freshmen in Tyrone Burris and Tristan Abrams. So those two guys highly touted as well. So who knows? Maybe they could break through. Probably need to put on some weight this offseason if that's going to happen, but we'll see there. All right, linebacker, Matt. Currently nobody for Indiana, or sorry, no additions for Indiana. You're losing Najee Logan, who obviously he was gone way before the portal opened, and then Josh Rudolph as well. But linebacker, you get Aiden Fisher back, so he's probably going to play 90-95% of the snaps at middle linebacker. Weak side linebacker, you got to replace Jalen Walker. As things stand, you probably think that Elijah Hardy is going to step into that role, but I also wouldn't be shocked if Indiana goes out and finds somebody who can compete for that weak side spot.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know that it's a high priority, but I think if there's somebody that comes along that they like, I could definitely see them doing that. And then also, the other guy, Quentin, was it Quentin Clark, who redshirted this year? They were high on him. He missed his senior year down in Georgia, but he's an athletic guy. And obviously, I'm not saying he's going to be a starter, but he does. I think he's a guy that maybe could be a sneaky surprise next year at linebacker for IU. And Isaiah Jones, I thought he was solid. I mean, it looked like maybe, he was a guy that may not even last in Indiana, and then they found a role for him. The old staff really couldn't find that role for him, and this staff did. So there's some depth. It would be nice if you could go out and get a guy that you can plug in, a veteran guy next to Fisher. But to me, it's not a crying need. It's more of a luxury than anything if you could find that guy. But I like the linebacker position. I think the way it is right now, I think they're in pretty good shape there. But like I said, if a guy comes along, I'm sure they will definitely be interested.
Yeah, yeah. So that we'll keep an eye on that as well. But getting Aiden Fisher back helps solve a lot of problems there, regardless of who's playing next to him. So that will be another interesting position battle to watch at that weak side linebacker spot. All right, cornerbacks. Marion Knighton is locked in for Indiana, and then yesterday, 2 days ago, Indiana got a commitment from Pitt, starting cornerback Rylan Gandy. I did not expect Indiana to add, two cornerbacks of this caliber, former starters at their previous schools. So right now, it looks like a very crowded cornerback room, which again, good problem to have. You want to be able to sort through all that, competition and talent, but you get Jamari Sharp back, you get Pons and Jameer Johnson back, you add these two guys. It makes you wonder, how is this ultimately going to shake out? Is somebody going to move to, maybe safety, maybe to rover? There's a lot of questions, but it's good questions to have right now.
Yeah, corner is. I mean, you might make an argument it's the deepest position on the roster, just because they had two starters back, and Pons was an All-American, and I thought Johnson was solid. And then you had Knighton, and then Gandy was a guy that Pittsburgh did not want to lose. I mean, he was a big time get. He was their top corner And I know Pittsburgh kind of struggled at the end of the year, but he was their top guy. So, in my projection, Pons isn't going anywhere. So it makes me think that, Johnson's the guy that they want to provide some competition to. So I have Gandy in there right now. We'll see if that's how it plays out. And then maybe one of those other guys, if I had to, I hate to speculate on this. If I had to pick a position where I think there could be attrition between now and next season, like when the spring portal opens back up, it would be corner because there's just not enough playing time for all these guys, and somebody's gonna leave. I mean, let's just be honest. Somebody's gonna look for an opportunity somewhere else. Is my guess. I've not heard that. I'm not putting out source info. I'm just reading the tea leaves that you've got five guys who can play for two spots. Even if you put Rover in there, that's 5 for 3. There's two guys that aren't going to be playing a whole lot. So, but it's a good problem to have. Competition is a good thing. You always try to recruit players better than what you've got, and that's what it looks like they've tried to go out and do that, recruit guys who are as good or better than what they have. So we'll see how it shakes out. But that is a deep position.
Hmm. And you'd have to think too with Knight and Gandy, two guys who started at Pitt and NIU respectively. For them to come into to want to come into a situation where they're not guaranteed a starting spot, there's not an obvious path to a starting spot. Once again, it speaks a lot to the program and sort of the vision that Kurt Cignetti is selling. So, if one of those guys can win the starting job, that's it's probably a good sign and upgrading the talent level there as well. So. Cornerback, that will be another interesting position battle to watch in spring camp and in fall camp as well. And then lastly, rounding out things, Matt, here, actually, we do have specialists to get to, but safety. Safety is a room where I still think Indiana needs to add. You get Lewis Moore back, which is promising. He didn't play a whole ton last year at Ole Miss, but he's veteran, he's experienced, he knows, sort of the IU program and what it's about. So getting him back is good. You get Amari Farrell back at that starting strong safety spot. But behind them, you really don't have a whole lot. You get Bryson Bonds back, but he hasn't really done a whole lot in his career. Um, Lewis Moore's a good start, but I feel like Indiana needs to keep adding here.
Yeah, I think they're trying. I mean, I don't know if they're going to add anybody here for spring ball because we're so late. And I mean, classes start next week. Maybe you can try to sneak another visit in. I don't know. I don't know anybody. I heard today that Christian Harrison, the DB from Tennessee, who they were looking at as a safety, people know his dad, especially from around here. Rodney Harrison was a great player in the NFL for the Chargers and the Patriots. I've heard it's not looking like Indiana is going to be in the mix for him anymore. So they're going to have to probably, look somewhere else. It is, obviously it's tough to count on a young guy, but Byron Baldwin's going to have a real shot to play early. He's coming in mid-year, and the dude's a stud. He's a legit player. Now, you'd like to bring him along slowly and not have to throw him to the wolves right away. But I think he's a guy that could be in the mix somewhere in the secondary. And then we got to kind of count Rover in here too. I know we're talking safety, but Rover, you lost Terry Jones. Sedarius Doss was kind of his backup. He didn't play a ton, but he was kind of the backup at Rover when they moved Farrell over to the safety. So you've lost your top two guys. Now, Jaja Boyd redshirted. They recruited him for that position. I think he'll be in the mix, but you need at least one more guy. I'm with you. You need, and they're trying to. Like I said, it may be more of a spring edition. You may have to wait till the spring. We'll see how that plays out. But yeah, I think if you can find another guy, that would be huge for that position because that's obviously, and not only that, you just need it for numbers. They don't have a ton of safety bodies right now. They need a few more. They just need some, and this may force Deontay Stewart to safety when he gets on campus. They recruit him as a corner. And at that size, it'd be great if you could leave him at corner, but you may have to move him to safety because you're awful thin at that position, especially in spring ball.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, the rover position. So right now is besides Jaja Boyd, is anybody else there of the returners?
I mean, you could to me, Bonds always seemed like a guy who could maybe fit there because I always felt like he's a little bit better closer to the line of scrimmage than he is maybe deeper out in space. And he looks like a guy that he is not afraid to hit. And obviously it's almost like you're kind of playing like a hybrid linebacker safety kind of deal. Coverage wise, I haven't seen enough of him to say, but I would say he could probably fit there. Right now, my guess is if the season started next week, it would be Moore and Farrell at safety and Bonds Bryson Bonds at the Rover with Boyd rotating in there. So, like I said, the problem is at safety. If somebody goes down, who do you go to? You know what I mean? Like you don't. You're going to be going to a freshman. I mean, they've only got, if I'm on my depth chart, I think they have 6 scholarship safeties right now on the roster, and one of those is Garrett Reese, who will not be here until summertime. So right now you got like, now I'm sure there's going to be some walk-ons. I don't have the walk-ons because I don't know who the walk-ons are going to be because that's changed with the new roster, require or limits. I don't know who the walk-ons are going to be. There'll be some walk-on safeties, but I'm just saying safety's position in the spring, it's going to be a little bit of a empty room, so to speak, because they don't have a ton of guys right there right now at that spot, at least scholarship wise.
Yeah. And so it is worth noting too that Lewis Moore, I think, played a good amount of his snaps at Ole Miss in at the nickel position, which is kind of the rover for
And
IU.
he could, yeah, that's a good point. He could be that for IU. I have him at safety just because I think he's the best option of what they have right now, other than Farrell. But you could be right. He could be that rover guy. And if they can go find somebody in the portal, then you leave him at rover and you play that other guy back there with Farrell. But that I just have him there because I watched him in the bowl game and he was kind of playing a deeper safety. I watched him play last week or whatever it was the other day, and he was playing more of a safety. So, but I'm sure he could, like you said, he played slot, so he could play in that rover spot as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Last one to round us out here on the portal edition so far. Special teams. You get three guys: Mitch McCarthy, punter out of UCF; Sam Lindsay, long snapper, probably going to be a walk-on type deal; and then Brendan Frankie, uh, probably a kickoff specialist, long range kicker type deal. He's coming from Texas State. So you lose James Evans, you find his replacement in McCarthy. You lose Derek McCormick, you find his replacement in Frank. So two guys you fill those two positions, which is good. And then Mark Langston didn't know if he was going to come back. It looks like he will be, but you get some depth behind him as well, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, I would say punter wise, it's probably a fairly even swap. I mean, I know some people are kind of down on Evans, but James Evans had some good punts. They're similar guys. They're both well, I think Evans from New Zealand, but they both trained at the Pro Kick Australia. McCarthy's a huge dude. He was actually came over to the States in high school because he was a basketball player and played somewhere in California for a season because he was thinking about playing college basketball. Good athlete. He was drafted like 6th or 7th in the Australian rules football or rugby or whatever it is they play over there. Good athlete, big guy, good leg. I think you traded up. I mean, I know McCormick early on was pretty good, but overall, you've traded up significantly. Last year, at a 78 kickoff, 64 were touchbacks for Frankie. This guy's got a monster leg. I think he's going to be, and that's a huge deal. Being able to put the ball in the back of the end zone on kickoffs. Lindsey's interesting. Langston, I've been told, is back. Lindsey's a walk-on. My guess is he's a walk-on for 1 year. He'll be a redshirt sophomore. He was a snapper for Georgia State. Their starting snapper, so he's got experience. He's your backup. And then my guess is when he's a redshirt junior in 26, he's a scholarship guy. I don't know that, but that's just my guess is how it'll play out. And then he'll be your snapper for 2 years, assuming, he performs up to where he needs to perform. But yeah, they've done a good job. Like I said, they filled a ton of holes. We've talked about there's a couple that they still probably need to fill, tight end, O-line, edge, maybe linebacker, then definitely safety. But I mean, it's not like if the season started, they'd be in a world of hurt. I mean, they even at safety in the secondary, you could probably figure something out. It would be you'd be a little bit in a bind, and you be really hoping you don't have any injuries. But this roster on paper is pretty darn good for 25.
Yeah. And going into spring ball, thinking back to last year, when Indiana was entering spring ball, and obviously that was the first year in Signetti. They've only been here for less than a month. I feel better about the roster going into spring ball this year than I did last year, at least with the depth at the positions and how it at least seems like the depth chart is going to shake out as of right now. So
Yeah, and I think the big thing is if you look at obviously you're gonna have a new quarterback, but he's a veteran guy. But running back, you got a guy back in Kalon Black. At receiver, you got 2 guys back. You got guys back at tight end. You got a couple guys back at O line. The D line, you got Kamara back. You got Tucker back. You got some guys there. Fisher, obviously, mentioned at linebacker. Corner, there's guys back. Safety, Farrell's back. At every level of the team, you have players back. And I think that's huge. Last year, you did not have that. You had all new guys, and they had to gel quickly. And obviously, they did. It was a phenomenal season. But this year, I think it's going to be a much smoother transition in spring ball, and you're not so much where you're just trying to keep your head above water this year because you got all these guys back. at all these positions. And I like this team. We'll see how it turns out. It doesn't mean it's going to be 11-win team in the playoff again, but I think it's going to be a fun team. And the roster's not done. There's still plenty of time to add players, and they'll add more guys. But right now, they've got a really good start on the roster for 25 to have a good season.
Yeah, very encouraging nucleus so far. A lot more to come in the transfer portal here over the next few weeks. Matt has done a terrific job covering all the transfer portal stuff over on Peegs.com. I don't know next time we're going to record a podcast. Matt, when do you want to do one? Like closer to spring ball starts or?
Yeah, somebody did mention on the board. They asked about a mailbag. I guess we could maybe
Yeah.
do put some. We could do a thing where they send us some questions. Yeah, we can maybe do one either next week or the week after because the portal. Maybe one. Well, maybe in a couple weeks because there's going to be some junior days at the end of the month in the early February, so we can kind of preview those. And then maybe wait a few weeks and maybe do one after those junior days or something, and then maybe one right at the start of spring ball. So we could probably do two or three more here in the next few months. But yeah, maybe do one. The next one be for questions for people on the board.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that works. And then Matt and I are also planning on doing a year-end awards for the 2024 season. So keep a lookout on Peegs.com for that. But for now, it's been quite the last 3 weeks since we last recorded, but a lot to talk through. A lot of changes coming for Indiana here, roster wise, and as they lead into 2025. But that'll do it for us this week on the podcast. Matt, thanks for joining me once again, and we thank you folks for sticking with us throughout the whole 2024 season going into 2025. We hope you had a happy New Year's, happy holidays as well. And yeah, a lot of portal stuff coming. If you guys want to ask us questions on the board, you know where to find us. And we'll see you folks over on Peegs.com.